Friends, welcome to Perfect Picture channel. I am Jagdishyadav. An important event took place at India International Center in Delhi for all type of photographers working in any genre. The program was organized by Working News Cameraman Association. It has become very important for all who take photograph to know about the rules and regulations related to this profession. It is more important for photographers involved in photojournalism to know and understand these rules. If there is a negligence while taking the photograph and while using it, then punishment may also have to be faced. Perfect Picture channel is going to present 3 videos in front of you. I request you to watch this video carefully, listen and try to understand the existing law.
Thank you so much.
And now we request you, ma'am, please, because another thing I want to add here, she is fighting a case of a copyright of photographs. क्या उस photographs पे we have a copyright or our institutions have a copyright?
And good evening, everyone. Thank you to Mr. Shankar for inviting me. So, like you said, had I been speaking at any other event, I would have brought someone along from the office ki mere ek do photos खींच दो dais में. The advantage of being in this event is at least ये एक चीज तो guaranteed है कि कोई ना कोई photo तो खींच लेगा. Coming straight to that issue, what could possibly happen if you take my photograph at this event without my permission? So we'll break that down first and we'll take all of this issue by issue. So it's an event. I'm present here at this event. I'm speaking at this event. Sir is taking a photo of me. What happens when you're taking a photo or a video of somebody without their permission? So there are 2-3 things. The first question you need to ask yourself, and we were just having this conversation when you're over tea, where I said you have to break it down to granular questions. Break it down to questions. Question number 1 you need to ask yourself, is the event a public event or a private event? So if it's a public event, for example, are you there in your capacity as a journalist? Are you covering a public event because it is newsworthy? A cricket match, a demonstration, a protest, Jantar Mantar. These are all public events, something that makes it to the newspaper. Automatically, when you shoot a public event and you take photographs of people who are involved in that public event, that the moment it is news, what you're taking the photograph for is the purpose is news, then that is something where you don't have to go from person to every person who's in that photograph and take their permission, because something that is newsworthy, you have the right to take a photograph as a photojournalist of a newsworthy event happening in a public space. If an event is happening in a private space, now this is a private space. If this is happening in a private space and an outsider suddenly decides to come in, maybe I'm saying things to you here which are controversial. I'm saying it in the comfort of knowing that I'm in a closed group of people and I can say whatever I want here. I'm saying this in your interest. Suppose somebody comes in who's not authorized to be in this room, an outsider comes in and they start taking a video. Naturally, I will object because I have not consented to that content going out in the general public domain. So, in a private event, therefore, you don't have an automatic right to walk in and take photographs the way you would in a public event. So, naturally, then the question would be that if it's a private event, you will have to take the permission of the people who are organizing the event. Because the understanding is a private event is not necessarily news. Right? A private event that I'm having, you don't have an automatic right to gate crash my private event and take pictures without permission. So that's from the point of view of the event. Then comes the point of view of the people you're photographing. Again, like I said, if it's a public event where you're taking photographs, you don't need to take those people's permission. But only insofar as the photograph you're taking is for news purposes. अब आज के दिन में realism के चक्कर में a lot of advertisements, for example, will show the man walking on the street, some candid camera photo. है तो वो ad, पर आपको लगेगा that it's not an ad, it's actually something which is, आपको लगेगा that it's just a normal person walking on the street. So, if the purpose is commercial, if the purpose is for an ad or the purpose is that you're taking that picture. So, for example, I remember I think there was this series on tribal people somewhere in the northeast that Samar Singh Jodha had done an exhibition. Yeah. So if you're going to do an exhibition of, say, people of a particular tribal community, now that is meant to be an exhibition come sale. And every single portrait that you have taken of those individual members of that tribe, you intend to sell them multiple copies. So then your purpose is not news. A portrait of someone belonging to a particular endangered tribe is not news. The only reason you're taking that portrait is because you're going to exhibit that, you're going to earn money from the sales proceed of that photograph. So in that kind of a scenario, where the purpose is commercial, you do need to take permission of the person who's the subject of the photograph. Why do you need to take permission? And that will bring me back to what Sir was saying earlier at the beginning. The reason you need to take permission is because I have a right. If I am the subject of your photograph, I have a right to decide whether I want to be photographed by you or not. I have a right to decide whether I want so suppose you take a photograph of me and decide to use it in an advertisement seeking votes for a popular political party. Now, I may not subscribe to that political party. I may wish to have nothing to do with that political party. I may coincidentally be wearing, the colors of a particular political party, but I don't wish to be associated with them. So what happens in a scenario like that? Then I have the right to decide whether that endorsement is something that I want to be a part of or not. So you may take my picture and use it for an advertisement which is against a particular client I represent. I have a right to decide that I don't want to be part of that endorsement or that advertisement. That is the reason why when you're taking a picture that is going to be used for purely commercial purposes, you have to take the permission of the subject of that picture, the person who is in that picture. Now what happens when it is purportedly a public event, but there is a little bit of this privacy intersection, like the example of the LGBTQIA parade that Sir was talking about. You have to appreciate that a lot of people who are in the Pride parade are people who have not come out as queer to their families. They are not comfortable disclosing that identity to their employers, the places where they work or the homes where they live, and they feel that if that identity is disclosed, they may endanger their safety and health and security. So that is the reason why many of them wear, for example, masks and so on to cover their faces. But for someone who really knows me well, even if I'm wearing an eye mask and my face is splashed on the pages of a newspaper, will I not be identifiable by someone who knows me really well? Of course they'll be able to identify me. So for that reason, for reasons of privacy, you need to take the consent of those individuals before you take their photographs, because this is a scenario where there is a unique intersection between something that is a public event but has very strong private rights embedded in it. So, we always say this, that the law is quite logical if you think about it. It's not that complicated. If you think in your head, I don't think anything that I said so far to you sounded illogical, right? It makes sense. So often, you don't need to know the law to know the answers to the questions. You have to think in your mind, okay, if I have this checklist, is it a public event? Is there any potential harm to be caused to the people? Is this a private event? Is this newsworthy? In what capacity am I taking this picture? What purpose will the picture be put to? If you have this checklist of questions in your head, it's often easy for you to come up with the answers yourself as to whether what you're doing is permitted or not. Now, as a journalist, what happens, and this kind of is a bit of the, that's kind of one of the issues that we're debating in Mr. Shankar's case, that when a journalist is shooting something for a newspaper, is there a difference between ownership of a photograph? But let me take 2 steps back before I come to that and say, what is copyright really? We were talking about this earlier at tea time. Is copyright giving you the right to take a photograph? Certainly not. In fact, although it's called copyright, it sounds wrong, right? You can't have a right to copy. So it's kind of like a negative right in the sense that it's a right against copying. So copyright laws don't give you the right to take a photograph. That is your inherent right. As a journalist, as a photographer, as a cinematographer, you have the right to take photos, you have the right to shoot videos. That right is inherent. Copyright law only deals with the aspects of when a product results from that. When a photograph is created, when a film is created, when a book is written, who owns that? What are the limits of the rights? Who can use that? What is fair use? Who can use it free of charge? Who has to pay money to use it? What are the forms in which it can be used? Those are the kind of things that copyright law deals with. So the copyright law is not giving you a right to take photographs, right? That is your inherent right. It's like, that's your form of self-expression. So it's like eating, walking, talking for somebody. Taking photographs may be as integral to defining who you are as eating, walking, and talking. So that's your inherent right. Now, unlike other forms of intellectual property laws like trademark law, or not even trademark law, well, patent laws and design laws, all of them require you to have a registration to be able to assert your rights. The interesting thing about copyright law was it was always understood internationally to be something that is an individual right that is meant to protect creators, that's meant to protect authors and artists. And so the idea of copyright law was it was not meant to burden authors and artists. So this whole process of अच्छा जाके आपको register कराना है, ये कराना है, fees देना है. So it was the idea of the way copyright law was written was that that burden shouldn't be there on you. So a lot of people think that in order to be able to assert your copyright, you have to get a copyright registration, but that's not true. आपको कोई भी चीज register करने की जरूरत नहीं है. If you have taken a photograph, you own the copyright in that photograph, subject to certain exceptions, which I'll talk about. So, you as an artist, you've drawn a sketch, you have the copyright in that sketch. You as an author have written a book, have written a poem, whatever, you own that. So, your right to be identified as the creator of that work is inherent. Inherent means you have that right. You don't have to register, no one has to declare that you have that right. You have it inherently. So what happens when you're an employee of an organization? When you're not a freelancer, not a stringer, you're an employee of a, say, a news publication. So then you're taking photographs, irrespective of what practice may exist in the market. If you are an employee, the understanding is that when you're going to cover an event, you're going on behalf of your employer. Your employer is paying you a salary at the end of the month. That salary is being paid to you so that you will be available to take pictures when an event happens or wherever they send you. That is why they are paying you a salary. So when you're drawing a monthly salary and not getting paid on the basis of the photographs that you're clicking, you're an employee on the record. Then the copyright in the photographs that you take. So there is a distinction, for example, between author and first owner of copyright. So, although you are the author or the artist or the photographer who took the picture, the first owner of copyright will be your employer because you're an employee. So that is the distinction between an employer, someone who is in an employment situation, versus someone who is a stringer or a freelancer. Because if you are a freelancer, you have no boss. You take photographs, you can give that photo to X, you can give it to Y, you can give it to Z. You can decide when you are in a position to decide who you are going to give that photo to. When you've not been sent to an event on behalf of anybody. When no one has told you how to take those photos. So for example, if it's something that I commission, right, like a portrait, I say, please aap mere liye portraits खींच दीजिए. This is the kind of lighting I want. This is the kind of setting I want. This is the backdrop I want. I want to look like this. I want to look thinner. I want to look taller. I'm going to sit like this. So what is that? That's a commissioned work. I'm telling you, please shoot exactly on the basis of the instructions I give you. So who is visualizing that image? You or me? Me. Because I'm commissioning it. I'm telling you precisely what I want. And I'm paying you money for it. I'm paying for your equipment. I'm paying the development cost. So in that kind of a scenario, even though you're a freelancer or an outsider who's not employed by me, but because it is what is called a commissioned work, right? So like you see that for sculptures, for example, or paintings, where someone does a painting on a commission or a sculpture on a commission. So the moment something is a commissioned work, then also the person who's commissioning will own it. But when you are free, a newsworthy event has happened, or some major event has happened, some major mishap has happened, something happy has happened, a new law is passed, people are celebrating, people are out on the streets, and you just go there and you start taking pictures and you get some beautiful pictures. No one has commissioned it. Although you know in your head, you're not taking the pictures just for the sake of taking pictures. You have 3 or 4 potential people you're going to sell those pictures to. आपके कुछ relationships है with newspapers etc. आपको पता है कि you have these possible clients जिनको जाके आप वो pictures दे सकते हो. But that's not a commissioned work. Because they have not told you how exactly you are supposed to take a picture, and they have the right to reject the picture also. They can keep it, they will reject it also, possibly. And you will get paid on the basis of how many pictures they decide to keep. So in other words, the test really is, whether it's an employer-employee relationship or a commission work relationship, the test is who is taking the risk. By risk I mean the cost of the equipment. You know, going there. What if, जैसे आप कह रहे थे नेहरू जी के फोटो के बारे में, what if you don't get a single photograph worthy of being taken? Suppose आपका पुराने जमाने की बात है, पूरा फिल्म खराब हो गया. Who is bearing that cost? That is the test. So, जैसे फिल्म में बोलते हैं कि the director may have a creative vision, but who is bearing the cost of making a film? The producer. That is why the producer is the owner of a film, not the director, in law. Because the cost of whether that film will work or not, the cost of the actors, the cost of the sets, the cost of everything is on the basis of the producer. Producer, that's why, gets to take a call. He may choose not to take a creative call, but he can if he wishes to say कि अच्छा हम स्विट्जरलैंड में नहीं जी, हम कश्मीर में शूट करेंगे, मेरा इतना ही बजट है. So the producer ends up being the owner of copyright. Therefore, so similarly, as long as you're taking the risk yourself and you're selling it to multiple people, you're not employed by anyone, you own the copyright over that work. Now we look at the intersection of privacy rights. We had a case in the Supreme Court sometime in 2017, which for the first time, actually the Supreme Court went into the issue of a right to privacy. This was in the context of the Aadhaar. People had filed cases against the Aadhaar and said that, you know, this is a violation of my right to privacy. And the Supreme Court had an opportunity to discuss that for the first time. And that's when the Supreme Court said, yes, everybody has a fundamental right to privacy. So what happens when a Supreme Court declares that everybody has a fundamental right to privacy? Does that mean एक पौधे की तरह suddenly एक privacy right grow किया? नहीं. It just acknowledges कि आपके पास हमेशा वो right थी. We never saw it as a fundamental right. There was no declaration that it's a fundamental right. The Supreme Court is declaring that your right to privacy is a fundamental right. So what happens when your right to privacy is declared a fundamental right? That means उसके बाद से issues of privacy become a little bit more important. So people start being a little bit more careful. So when you're working with commercial houses, आप अगर किसी ad film को shoot कर रहे हो या किसी के लिए आप you're making a film or you're even taking pictures on someone else's behalf or you're putting up your pictures on say Getty Images or a stock photo website or something like that, they want to know if you have what is called a copyright release. So the reason is that they want to make sure that kal ko koi aake they don't file a claim or they don't make a claim saying I didn't authorize you to take this picture of mine, right? So you see all kinds of interesting cases overseas in the US etc. कि अच्छा किसी ने एक पब्लिक प्लेस में एक फोटो खींच लिया, किसी रेस्टोरेंट के अंदर में एक फोटो खींच लिया, जनरली एक रेस्टोरेंट का, और कोने में there's a couple sitting who are actually not a couple, they're having an affair, and वो फोटो कहीं publish हो गया and they talk about a breach of their right to privacy because they did not wish to be seen in public together like that, and the photographer didn't take their permission while including them in the photograph. So an ordinary man on the street has a right to privacy. They have a right to not be seen, or they have a right to decide where they want to be seen. So if the event is not a newsworthy event, if you're just taking a photograph inside a private space that is a restaurant, आज के ज़माने में हर कोई selfie ले रहा है, अब कितनी बार होता है कि हम airport में जा रहे हैं या कुछ जा रहे हैं, someone's doing a video call and walking around. I don't want to be in somebody else's call. I don't want to be in the background. I choose not to be. So that's my right to privacy, where I can say, look, you can't take a picture of me, you can't include me in your frame. That's my right to privacy. I have every right to say that. If someone's taking a general picture, not of an event. So if I am caught in the middle of say a dharna, then I can't say no, sorry, it's a right to privacy, because that is a newsworthy event. So that distinction you have to always keep in mind. That's a very critical distinction. अब क्या होता है, obviously if you're taking pictures, very practically speaking, आप कनॉट प्लेस में जा रहे हो, वहाँ पे आप you're taking pictures of say रिक्शा वाला, पान वाला, ऐसे लोग खड़े हैं, general surrounding, people are standing. So they may, or obviously that's not a scenario where you're going to go down with copyright release form सबसे sign कराने के लिए. That's not practical thing. So what happens is if a person is distinctly identifiable, अब क्या होता है, that invariably works for celebrities, right? So if a celebrity is distinctly identifiable in a photograph, और आपने वो photograph ली, then what happens? There again you have to create the public event, private event distinction. If that celebrity is part of a public event, JNU में protests चल रहे, वहाँ पे दीपिका पादुकोण and स्वरा भास्कर come and stand in the protests alongside the students. That's a public event. You take a picture of them in the public event, that's fine. Deepika Padukone is at the airport. आप उनका फोटो खींचते हैं. You notice that she's wearing track pants which have the Adidas logo on it. आप Adidas को देते हो. और अनुष्का शर्मा, you see she's wearing Adidas. आप Adidas को देते हो. She's the brand ambassador for Puma. आप Adidas को देते हो. Adidas uses it as an ad, saying देखो Puma के brand ambassadors भी हमारे track pants पहनते हैं. So what have you done? You've ruined her commercial relationship with Puma. Can you do that? You can't. Even though she's in a public place like the airport. Right? So क्या होता है? With a celebrity, with ordinary people like you and me in the room, it's called a right of privacy. With a celebrity, you have what is called personality rights. Personality rights celebrities को और public figures को मिलता है. They are a personality. So they have added rights. They have the right to decide in what way their name, their image can be commercialized. आपने पढ़ा होगा न्यूज़पेपर्स में recently अमिताभ बच्चन won a case on personality rights in the Delhi High Court because अमिताभ बच्चन के voice use करते हैं बहुत लोग radio ads में. That's not actually Amitabh Bachchan, but it sounds like Amitabh Bachchan. Back in the radio days, the most popular voice for imitators was Amin Sayani's voice, right? So if it's a recognizable voice which sounds like Amin Sayani, he's a personality, he has the right to say, you can't use a voice similar to mine as if to create an impression कि मैं आपका ad कर रहा हूँ. आप मानो अमिताभ बच्चन की आवाज use करके कोई अगर कोई tobacco ad कर रहा है and he doesn't want to be associated with the product. हालांकि हमारे सारे सुपरस्टार्स बिमल इलायची में एड्स कर रहे हैं आजकल, बट suppose Amitabh Bachchan says, I don't want to be associated, it's against my brand, I don't want to be associated with this tobacco product. He has the right to decide कि वो कौन से ब्रांड के साथ एसोसिएट होंगे, वो कौन से कमर्शियल चीज के साथ एसोसिएट होंगे, कौन से में नहीं होंगे. सो दैट पर्सनैलिटी राइट्स विल कम इन द वे. सो सेलिब्रिटी के लिए अगर आप फोटो खींच रहे हैं किसी भी सिनारियो में, अनलेस इट्स अ पब्लिक इवेंट, यू हैव टू बी वेरी केयरफुल एंड यू मस्ट मेक श्योर दैट यू गेट अ कॉपीराइट रिलीज. सो you can ignore it when it comes to the ordinary man on the street, but definitely don't ignore it when it comes to a celebrity. And the final point I'll make before throwing it open to questions also and to discuss some of...
We will do it after.
Yes. But the other point I wanted to make with respect to, taking photographs and what you should and shouldn't do is also remember that once you've taken the photograph and given it to somebody, चाहे वो आपका employer क्यों ना हो, even in a scenario where you're employed by a newspaper or you've done it for somebody where it's a commissioned work, so you know that you're not the first owner of copyright, there is still one right that will always be yours. अगर आपने फोटो बेच भी दी है, you have what is called a moral right. Moral right is a special category of right which is given to authors and artists. What is a moral right? Moral right can be split into two. One is the right of paternity. Paternity माने fatherhood. माने you have the right to be known as the photographer. तो आप एक खूबसूरत फोटो लेंगे और आपने मुझे बेच दिया और वो फोटो मैंने पब्लिश कर लिया ये कह के कि मैंने ये फोटो खींची है. I can't do that. That is a violation of your right to paternity. So even if you sell that photo to me, you continue to own the right to be called the photographer. Nobody can substitute your name with mine. Right? So that moral right of yours, you will always retain. So if you are the photographer of that photo, you retain the right to be called its photographer even if you have sold that photo. One, that's your right to paternity. The second is the right of integrity. What is the right of integrity? No one can mutilate that photograph. So M.F. Hussain की paintings है, he's painted a bunch of women, some prude comes and says कि इनको ढंग की साड़ी पहना देते हैं, let's cover them up. Obscene लग रहा है मुझे आजकल तो. We know people get offended at the drop of a hat when it comes to artistic expression. So some Philistine comes and says कि ये जो सारे artists के photographs है, there is a teacher who had to resign from a school in Europe because she showed her students the sculpture of Michelangelo's David. अब Michelangelo ने बनाया David का sculpture as a man with no clothing. They said, no, this is obscenity. How can you expose school children to it? So the question of what is obscene versus art is something that not just India, in many countries in the world, that debate continues. So someone decides to come and कि अच्छा चलो David को हम वेष्टी पहना देते हैं, ऊपर में एक शर्ट पहना देते हैं. Let's dress him up. You can't do that. That's a right of integrity. What is the right of integrity? The sculptor, namely Michelangelo, alone has the right to decide how that subject is going to look. It's his sculpture, his choice. You paint a picture, no one gets to tell you whether the sky is blue or the sky is pink. You get to decide that. So when you have created a work in a particular way, no one has the right to edit that work, change that work, alter that work in a way that your vision changes. However, moral rights आप assign कर सकते हैं. In other words, अगर आप अपने फोटो बेच रहे हैं किसी को, if you're selling it to a newspaper or to somebody, you need to read the contract carefully, because that contract may say that I hereby say that I am giving up my moral rights in this picture. But it is not necessary, if you're giving a picture, that you should give away your moral rights as well. You can certainly give away the copyright in the picture. You can say, okay, you have the copyright over it. So copyright and moral rights are separate. So if you get paid, you give the copyright in the picture, but don't give away your moral rights.
Friends, it was first video, and I will present 2 more video in this subject. So kindly subscribe my channel, and if you like, share it to other friends. Thank you so much.